Okay, great. So thank you all again for being here. And thank you to D and D for their incredible kickoff to our colloquium and keynote conversation. I'm Emma Walker. I'm one of the two current editor-in-chiefs of the Review in Law and Social Change. And before we move into our next panel, I want to just share a few words about our journal and what we do here. RLSC was founded in the 1960s by activist students and professors who sought to ensure that legal scholarship was responsive to the injustices suffered by those on society's margins. Still today, our journal is seeking constantly to be accountable to and learning from the communities most impacted by the laws that we're influencing. RLSC is proud to continue to uphold its commitment to radical social change by using our platform to fight for a more just world. From being the first law review to commit fully to the goals of the Palestinian BDS National Committee's consumer and academic boycott campaigns, to publishing this year our first ever issue of entirely participatory legal scholarship, which is scholarship that is written by those whose expertise in the law comes from experiencing the direct effects of the law, and which that issue will include the work of D&D, and to publishing our Scholarship from the Inside series, and to fighting for compensation for the work journal editors do so that journal experience can be an option for all students in law school regardless of background. This colloquium is an important piece of that work, and we're so grateful to have the chance to learn from the organizers and advocates that have been fighting for queer liberation for generations. I want to give a special shout out to Nathaniel Waldman, Connor Engel, and Yimeng Wang, our colloquium editors, for their tireless work in organizing this colloquium and bringing us all here today. I also want to take a minute to recognize the moment we're in. After last night's massacre, over 30,000 Palestinians have been killed in the last 5 months, while the legal community remains largely silent, if not outright hostile, to recognizing the genocide. We're here today to discuss queer liberation, and I want to emphasize that queer liberation includes the freedom of all queer people from occupation and from empire and from death. The fight for queer liberation must include Palestinian members of our community and must stand against the Israeli weaponization of the queer identity in service of its occupation. To date, some of the most prominent mainstream LGBT advocacy groups, including GLAAD, Human Rights Campaign, and the Trevor Project, have failed to condemn Israeli violence or call for a ceasefire. Legal academia, too, is complicit in the silencing of the Palestinian narrative. As Rabia Igbaria poignantly said in his piece that was refused publication in the Harvard Law Review, legal scholars tend to sharpen their pens after the smell of death has dissipated and moral clarity is no longer urgent. We here at RLSC urge you all today to ground yourselves in the dedication of this year's colloquium to all of the trans, lesbian, gay, bisexual, and queer activists, artists, and visionaries from Palestine to New York City who have been lost to the state-sanctioned use of violence against us, and to those who have and continued to fight for their own liberation and the liberation of their siblings across the world. So, thank you all again for being here, and now I'm excited to welcome Nat to introduce this upcoming panel.
I know you all were expecting that. I'm sorry to disappoint. Okay, our next panel unites generations of activists in the common cause of justice and equality. I would like to introduce our moderator, a man who for decades has been fighting tooth and painted nail for the rights of all people to live unburdened by HIV/AIDS. Ron Goldberg was an early member of ACT UP and the AIDS Coalition to Unleash Power, where he chaired committees, planned protests, led teach-ins, facilitated weekly meetings, and became ACT UP's unofficial chant queen. His recent memoir, Boy with a Bullhorn, which is a fantastic read, intertwines Goldberg's experiences with the larger chronological history of ACT UP, which confronted political leaders and an often uncaring public to successfully change the course of the AIDS epidemic. I'd like to hand it over to him. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Connor. And also thank you to Nat and to the NYU Review of Law and Social Change for this colloquium. And I will introduce the panel. So, starting with I want to introduce Ceyenne Doroshow, who is a performer, activist, organizer, community-based researcher, and public figure in the trans and sex worker rights movements. As the founder and executive director of GLITS, Gays and Lesbians Living in Transgender Society, she works to provide holistic care to LGBTQ sex workers while serving on the boards of Swap Behind Bars, Caribbean Equality Project, and the SOAR Institute. Thank you for being here. It's a privilege to be on a panel with you.
Thank you.
Next up is Derrick Ingram. Derrick Ingram is a co-founder and the director of communications of Warriors in the Garden, WITG, a collective of activists dedicated to nonviolent protest, propelling social and legislative change. Having experienced police surveillance and targeting while organizing against police brutality, Derrick works to connect with others who have been traumatized by the police and to inform comrades about the risks of police monitoring when engaged in civil disobedience. Thank you for joining us. I'll go in order. Mix Mizrahi is, AKA Mix Enigma, is a Staten Island-based artist. They take inspiration from their Mizrahi Jewish heritage, their upbringing in both New York and Palestine, and their experience as a queer person navigating the world. Mix Mizrahi has multiple residencies as a City Artist Corps member and engages in queer community building by hosting open mics, block parties, and Transgender Day of Remembrance events. Thank you for joining us. And finally, Leslie Cagan. Leslie Cagan is a lifelong peace and social justice organizer, active in the queer movement since 1970s. She has worked to bring other social change issues into this movement while bringing queer issues into other struggles. From 2002 to 2009, she coordinated the largest anti-war coalition in this country's history, United for Peace and Justice. Leslie was one of the lead organizers of the 1987 Second National March on Washington for Lesbian and Gay Rights. I was there. It was fabulous. And helped organize the Queer Liberation March in New York City on the 50th anniversary of Stonewall. I was there too. Thank you, Leslie. It is a privilege. And I think that's it. So this panel is called Organizing Around LGBTQ Issues, an Intergenerational Discussion. So let's discuss. I want to sort of frame this around the idea of cooperation, connection, and the continuum between the generations of LGBTQ plus movement. I want to start just by asking, I guess, these are people who have their feet on the ground, who are on the ground, boots on the ground, if you'll pardon the militaristic metaphor. And so we're going to talk about how it's done, how it's happening in the streets, in the halls of government, in the courts. We're going to how it happens. So why don't I start with Ceyenne, since you're there and your mic is on. Why don't you subtle. What are you working on? What are your issues? What are your challenges?
What am I working on? The challenges are life, period.
Right.
When you're Black, when you're trans, when you're queer. So everything's a challenge. Housing is a big issue, affordable housing. Scholarships for our people, that's really necessary. Not just housing projects connected to HIV and testing. We need scholarships. We need our children and the youth and even the elders to go back to school to learn something about the world that's running us so we can run the world. We need to be deeply rooted in politics. As LGBT community members, we need to be at the table, creating the table of language, because then we're making a change. We got to be intentional about how we show up in Albany and Washington, D.C. to talk to heads of state. All that frivolous stuff that people are throwing around, screw all of that. We are being hunted. in a political sense, in a financial sense, and if you're trans, you're like the new slave. You're like the new thing at the table that's still being marginalized within the umbrella of LGBT. So we need to be a part of the designing of change and the creation of what new politics look like with us involved.
Great, thank you. I'm going to ask this. I'm sort of ask the same. This question is just sort of to set the table. So let's just Derrick, you.
Can you repeat the question?
Oh, sure. It's sort of like, what is your work focused on? What are the challenges you're facing? What are, and actually also, how do you organize?
Yeah, so right now, Warriors in the Garden and a lot of the collectives that I'm working with are really seeing that now specifically, especially post George Floyd, this has been a level of consciousness raising, as well as people finally coming together and being informed. And a lot of that is happening digitally and online. A lot of people are consuming more and more various and different forms of media and being able to share resources and educational elements and educational material and curriculum digitally. And I've seen, I believe, I've been organizing since 2014, enlightenment period, and that's what we've been focused on, is radicalizing people mentally, spiritually, and also meeting their basic needs while continuing to try to engage them in terms of theory and how to structurally organize a movement. I think the work that we're doing now in terms of raising consciousness is really setting the groundwork for what I believe in the next 10 to 15 years for there to be mass legislative and social change, I believe, in the U.S. But right now we're laying that groundwork by really giving people the resources, the materials, giving people teach-ins and things to really, really learn and sink their teeth into. And the appetite for that, especially with an election coming up and what's currently going on in Palestine, I really think is meeting the needs of a lot of people that don't know where to start and are in the beginning stages of really becoming more radical in their thought. Just giving them the resources to learn and engage and to grow and really teaching people how to think critically and question things and wonder why things and institutions and systems are currently the way they are. We're really working on those baby steps because that's where a lot of people are, and we're meeting people where they are, and that happens to be online.
Good, thank you. Mix Enigma.
Is the mic on?
Yeah, go.
Okay, perfect. So I feel that I became an accidental activist, and part of being an accidental activist is you are also pushed and forced sometimes to take action when you're part of a marginalized community. I've done organizing in different sectors for a long time, but not as long as my peers here. But during the pandemic, I really shifted to a lot of online and intentional communities because my health deteriorated, and I won't name them out, but there's groups that I've been involved in that has still a very hierarchical way of thinking. Even in queer grassroots organizations where we don't see women, BIPOC people, trans people being in leadership as the same as their white cis male counterparts. So some of the things that I've been doing was creating a mutual aid for artists at the intersections of disability and identity. And we've raised, a few $1,000s and mentorship and have a few thousand members through groups called like New York City Queer Activists. I've also used platforms and organizations to host my own solidarity Shabbats. I did a solidarity Shabbat for Palestine. And all sorts of events through organizations like One Table. But even in the Jewish world, as liberal as there could be, there's a real silence when it comes to being allies in the queer struggle, as well as the Palestinian struggle, as well as many other struggles. And there's only so much that you could do as an individual when you're under-resourced. So I really channel what Ceyenne said about scholarship. We really need to be invested in our care, in the work that we do, and in our profiles if we're ordered to continue to do the work.
Thank you. Leslie, I mean, I think I'd like you to sort of provide some perspective because your activist career spans many movements and on a long time. So I don't know. Sum up the last 50 years, why don't you?
Okay. Actually, I'm not going to do that. I just want to take a moment to say something about the moment that we're in. And that happens to be where, since October, I have put literally 98% of my waking energies into this. I can't even find the words anymore to describe what the Israeli government, with our tax dollars supporting them, are doing every single day in Gaza and in the West Bank. I mean, it's not the same scale, but the horrors in the West Bank are real also. So I am I'm fully engaged at this point in efforts to call on our government to use the power it has to stop the Israeli government. And our government has a lot of power when it comes to that, and it comes to a whole lot of other things too. Having said that, I'm not ignoring, at least I hope I'm not ignoring, all the other issues that make us who we are here at this table, you in this room, people zooming in, and just people who we will never meet personally, right? People just getting up every morning, trying to earn a living, be part of the community. Some are raising families, some aren't. Just people living their lives and doing that in a way that is true and honest to who they are, to not have to hide any part of who we are, to bring our full selves to the table, if you will. So it's really, as I've seen it over the years, the struggle is, yes, we focus on a particular issue, a particular community at a given moment, but over the long haul, it's about all of us working together. Because, folks, I hate to say this, but none of us and none of our communities are going to win alone. If we're not all working together, what are we doing? So that's my...
Great. Thank you. I mean, actually, that's a nice segue because I think one of the key issues we have to deal with is coalition, right? And whether that's coalition both internally within our own community, but also coalition to other movements that exist. I guess I want to find out, how do you, I'll start, I mean, since you brought it up, how have you handled and how do you handle coalition building, both within the LGBTQ queer community and also with other movements?
Right. Well, that's a big question. We could do a colloquium, not for one day, for a week on coalitions. Let me just start by saying one thing. When I came out in 1972, and jumped right into what I now call the queer movement. At that point, it was really called the gay movement. And as lesbians, we had to fight to get that level of recognition that that term would be used. We had to fight to make it a lesbian and gay movement. As things developed over time, people who identify as bisexuals fought to be part of this community also. And it was a struggle, and it shouldn't have had to be, right? And trans people, binary people, lots of folks had to fight first to find their own identity, and what people call themselves is not just a word, right? It's a shorthand for a whole personality, a whole being. It's a word or two, but it means much more. We're talking about people, not just identities. That's clear. Anyway, what I'm trying to get at is within our movement, people have struggled, and I think are finally, after decades, at a better point. The work isn't done, but we're at a better point of understanding the complexities and the many dimensions of our own community, and to fully embrace each other. Like I said, we're not done with that work, but that's, I think, one big foundational piece to any coalition, is that a person, an organization, a community that wants to be, that needs to be part of that movement, part of that struggle, should not have to fight to get into it. We have to welcome each other, and not to homogenize ourselves, right? Not to say, oh, we're all the same. No, we're not all the same. We're all different, and that's a good thing.
Now I hear you.
For me, what's really important is establishing your value system. When you're doing something grassroots or independent or even as an organization, to making sure that your value system and your community agreements is very clear. It's very important for me, for the people that I invite, for the people that I trust, and to set the tone of the safety and this and what we tolerate and what we don't tolerate. I'll give you a perfect example. There's this young Jewish community professionals event that I went to, and there was non-tolerated sexual harassment that has happened, to the point that there was a female member who was groped that I had to go defend. And I had to speak to the leaders, and they said, yeah, we don't tolerate such and such, and blah, 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 blah. But I was like, basically, if you don't have in your community center a physical printout with a visual quick ad for people to come and walk by, to be able to process that, you can't expect that everyone who's going to walk in your door or walk in your space shares the same values. And sometimes we're naive and we're thinking, oh, I'm inviting my friend and they're inviting their friend, but they're not all coming from the same place. And they're not all coming with the same perspective and the same values. And I think that's really important also when you're establishing community rules when it comes to online organizing, which I've shifted again in the pandemic. And spaces where I'm like, sorry, we don't tolerate this. Sorry, you're taking up too much of the space. Again, I don't have the energy to name them right now, but if I do not see a space that is having a diverse group of people that is on the leadership and in the membership, I don't want to join. I don't want to be a part of it, right? I'm not going to join groups where I'm being dictated by a homogeneous group of people. And there still is a lot of queer organizing that is led by people with privileges in our communities. And we need to talk about that. And there's a reason why we still have intra-fighting and intra-racism and intra-transphobia and so on and so forth, because and this is also what our detractors want from us. They want us to fight each other. They want us to hate each other. They want us to not focus on the larger issue, which is our rights, our equality, our love for each other. And I think it's really important to establish that, you know, we may not see eye to eye, but we can learn to agree to disagree, and saying that I am not your enemy, right? Mm-hmm. And we need to be able to establish that if we want to be able to move forward.
I share a similar sentiment. I just have hesitations with the implementation of that mindset structurally. I've seen in a lot of organizing spaces, there be this kind of cultural element of like purity politic and a need for certain marginalized voices that may not have the necessary experience, leadership skills, resources uplifted into certain positions and in spaces just because they're marginalized. And me as a queer person, I don't want a seat at the table just because I'm black and queer. I want one because I'm the best freaking person at the job. That's just me personally. And I think we tread a very thin line a lot of the times when we make certain community demands centered around identity. And I also see it happens when it comes to this purity around political theory. And that bothers me a lot too. If you have to be a communist, you have to have this, you have to be a Marxist in this way, you have to be an orthodox Marxist, you have to be, these conversations really irk me and I think halt progress. And I think we spend a lot of times on those conversations instead of doing a lot of the work. And for me, I can work with almost anybody. I really can. The Black Panthers historically have worked with a lot of problematic groups, but they were aligned on 2 or 3 different things that they could agree on, and they focused on those 2 or 3 things. It didn't mean that they were necessarily in a coalition, but it meant that they were aligned on these 2 or 3 things, and they knew if they came together that they could tackle those things and be a powerful force. And that's where I come from. I try not to be a part of any type of coalition unless it's a popular front one, which means I don't have to necessarily agree with you on every single thing politically or in terms of the theories that you believe in, but here's 10 things I want to do to change my community. Do you agree with these 10 things, and can we go from here? And to me, when we enter coalitions and agreements with that mindset, it really opens the doors. And it really, what I've seen is like people, those spaces is where people truly become radicalized because they don't feel left out. They don't feel shut out. And they see that people that may have a different type of political agenda or worldview or perspective are doing the work, they're open-minded, and this is how they move and operate. And I think opening up those spaces and being open to people that may not necessarily align with me 100% is really how we're going to make a lot of progress, and really, I think, how the strongest coalitions are built.
Yeah, I know from my experience with ACT UP, I think that was something, initially, when we first started, it was really sort of, whatever it was, if it had something to do with AIDS and you could get someone else to work with you, go ahead, go do it. I think what wound up happening to us at a certain point was where it used to be you could do this and this and this, both because the crisis got so, it just continued to get worse despite all the work we were doing. It also became a situation with, no, if you're not doing this, then you're not fighting the real fight. If you're not doing this, and it became or. And that's where we got into trouble, is if people could go and do, and with the agreement that you understood that people were of good faith and you agreed on most of the time. But it's that 100% thing that'll kill you.
Absolutely.
Do you want to say anything to the?
Definitely. Coalition partnering for me has a kind of complex relationship. I don't partner with everybody. I don't believe in everybody's coalition when half this city is rooted in nasty politics and nasty business, especially centering around having coalitions with the LGBT community. A lot of these places, as a Black trans woman, as a Black founder, I've stepped into many of these organizations and I step back out. That's why I'm a founder. I don't have to work with you. I can literally choose not to be a part of your coalition or your work. I went to take a client to GMHC. And I had to think about it as we were going because I never really went into that establishment with an open heart. Why? Because the name of it in 2024 is still GMHC. There's no T, there's no L. It spells it out. Gay Men's Health Crisis. By now, they should have changed the acronym to make it match reality. So there will be no coalition leading there. Anti-Violence Law Project, when it comes to my community, is led by a cis white woman that has tokenized this community. You have to call it what it is. And this is the reason why I don't collate with them and won't be. But there are so many organizations that tokenize the process and want us in these rooms for funding and status and not want us in this room for employment and high positions. So they'll keep us in these agencies at low-rated positions, outreach and stuff like that, but won't back up an employee with a college degree. Because if I've been there for 2 years, goddamn it, y'all better be paying for college so I can grow within your organization. A lot of agencies don't do that in New York. So why am I, as a person who's developing a brand, who has developed a brand of real estate for community members to move in, why am I going to send people to your agency if my clients can't get a job? They should be looking at the other side of services as employment, because most of the time, all of us in this situation have got life experience down packed to where we are better knowledge than the social workers, than the paid academics that you got sitting in these positions. So we have to strategically dismantle the word coalition, because to be honest, I don't want to be in a room with half these people that are in these coalitions, because they come in with an intentional prejudice. So when we're looking at stuff like Palestine, which we need to say ceasefire to it all, because at the end of the day, a black trans woman and a black gay man is still dying. We cannot overlook that, because in all of this, I could still die. And we're not looking at the bigger picture to why. I'm looking at my relationship when I have to do things in coalition, or I have to reach out to even religious leaders. I'm being hunted by the Catholic Church right now, and I don't mind.
Yeah,
I don't mind
you
at
go.
all.
That was amazing.
If I had to do it, I would do it again. To be honest, if I had to do it again and one of my sisters left here and I could snatch one of the biggest landmarks in New York City, I would do it again, unselfishly. But this wasn't done to violate that establishment. This was done because I wanted to honor my girlfriend, plain and simple.
Does everyone know what Ceyenne is talking about? Why don't you explain just briefly?
I am the person that hosted Cecilia Gentili's funeral at St. Patrick's Cathedral. And I don't feel bad about it. I don't read the hate mail my staff do. And I would move that way again. I would do that again. If we had another icon leave here and they needed placement, just put it down and bring me my credit card. I think we get used and abused by the system that says we're supposed to work together. We're supposed to build this brand and love each other, and we're supposed to be in a room with the very people that hold us back. That's a lie. That's a lie. We have to go into these coalitions and in these groups and be transparent. I love you. Love you too. Catch a car too, where y'all gotta go. To be in these groups, so to be in these rooms, if I wanna be in your coalition, I wanna know everything about you. I wanna go through your social media. I wanna know if you are behind the scenes poison, because then I can get to know who you are. Most people 9 to 5 have the 9 to 5 face. I need to see the 6 to 11 and 12 face, because that bitch is going to be the one that I can rely on. In coalition, most of those people are only 9 to 5. I know your work and your work and your work probably leads to 24/7, because we don't get to tune out. Where's the coalition there? Where's the coalition in the middle of the night when you tired and your phone rings and your client is in need of specific help? help that makes you get out of bed and think and find them either emergency housing, an escape plan for domestic violence, or some kind of addiction problem? Where's the coalition that says, I am here after 6 o'clock and you have all my undivided attention? There are none. So we have to be intentional when we talk about coalition and collating with people, because most of the time, the people we have to be in a room with are far from the connection we need to be connected to.
That's great. Thank you. Actually, I'm going to take this literally, like being in the room. When I was doing my work with ACT UP, and we were in a room, we were meeting. It was every week. It was pre-digital. We were the last sort of the major sort of pre-digital grassroots movements. Things are clearly different now. How do you maintain an organization online? I know for us it was because people were coming into the room every week. It was like we could have people go to a demonstration, and we knew what we were doing the next Monday. We were back in the room figuring out what the next move was. How do you sustain a digital, I want to say a digital revolution, but that's not where we're at yet. But a digital organization, a digital movement online. How do you do that? I'm asking completely because I really don't know.
So Warriors in the Garden, we came together in May of 2020, and we were very intentional about how we wanted to roll out our organization digitally. I think for us, we knew and understood the power of social media and also the generational divide in terms of consumption of knowledge, in terms of people just even like having the capacity or time to read. And so we saw social media as a billboard and a tool to spread messages that we wanted and to really build community from there. Everything from different apps like Discord to Reddit to Instagram, we saw as different devices to create and build community and to communicate with people and to keep them consistently engaged in different types of ways. There's everything in terms of social media, different analytics you can look at, engagement styles, and we looked at it from a very kind of business marketing perspective in terms of how to get people engaged and how to share knowledge. And once we were able to do that, that's how we were able to build community. Once we were able to kind of hack how to get on people's timelines and get attention, we were able to kind of create the messages that we wanted to create, and from that create the community that we wanted to as well.
Yeah.
I come from a different moment, obviously. I think the first time that I personally was, used social media as an organizing tool was into the early 90s. When there was a lot of organizing before then, throughout human history, people have organized. Sometimes they do it well, sometimes they don't do it well, but it's not a new phenomenon. I think of the social media, the online, the Zoom phenomenon, as all as new tools for us. And the tools are never the goal. The tools are tools, right? And at some moments, in some situations, putting people in a room together in real time, in life, to actually look each other in the eye is critically important, and goes a long way to building trust. Having said that, I've been involved with any number of groups, organizations that are statewide or national, and you can't always have a weekly meeting in person, but you can use Zoom and stay connected. So it's never for me that these tools are perfect. worked, and the only ones we should use all the time. And this other set of tools, forget them. We don't want them. We have to be creative enough and open enough to understand that in this moment, for this struggle, this set of tools is going to work well. Right? And also one other thing is to be open enough to the next round of ideas that come along, right? And that's a struggle, right? When you've been doing organizing for a long time, you see certain things that work, you believe they're working, and so you want to hold on to those. How do you hold on to that and also be open to the new ideas that new people bring up, whether that's technology or other things? I think we always have to be as open as we can.
No, I was going to say that one of the amazing things that I think came from 2020, the after the uprisings, addressing the murder of George Floyd, but also the pandemic, was like, we realized that a lot of people were having accessibility issues, and also a lot of people didn't want to expose family members to COVID, and we had to be very, very creative in the tools in which we decided to use and how we were going to implement them. And we wanted to make sure that every time that we requested a direct action or people on the ground or something in person, that it wasn't frivolous, but it was something that was going to pack a punch, that was going to be mighty, and that was going to make a difference. And we found different ways to build trust digitally and different ways to kind of create calls to actions online that I felt like were super important and has thrusted us socially in a different area, and I think in a very positive area. And just seeing how quickly information, sometimes not accurate information, is spread, I think is really important. Yeah.
Yeah, actually, that's sort of takes me to the next question, which is as good as the digital world is for connecting people, it also creates a real surveillance issue. Which I don't have to tell you, but I know when we were talking last week, when I saw surveillance sort of as a topic, it's like, oh yeah, we were all surveilled. You know, there was the COINTELPRO, and you know there were police that act up, and the stuff that went on there, and it's like, and that was not good. But the level of surveillance and the danger of current activists because of the digital world is something that we really need to take into account in organizing. And I'm wondering, actually I'll ask Mixed Enigma first about how you deal with and handle digital surveillance. What do you?
I can only speak in my experience and no expert, and I'm always ever learning. There's no one person, there's no one platform, and there's no one right direction. It needs to, when you get to a place that you are able to have a group of people that you do entrust in managing your digital advocacy, the work needs to be shared. I know that a lot of grassroots organizations got off of WhatsApp and moved on to Signal, for example, to being able to have those conversations. And I'm sure there's probably 20 other apps that people use that I'm still only learning about. I can't give you the specificity of an expertise around it, but I could tell you that I had to many times create fake profiles and be able to manage that way, right? And not every platform that I have to use my personal information. And, we are really, really, really there's like new challenges, but there's new opportunities when it comes to online digital presence, right? You get to make your reach much larger than it was before, but at the same time, you make your reach available to everyone and anyone. And you need to make sure that how public do you want to be, right? And how private you want to be. And that could change, and that's for every person. I won't go into all the details, but someone reported or was concerned about a post that I wrote about mental health, which led to 15 police officers showing up in my small studio, removing me when I was half naked, and detaining me against my right and will over Yom Kippur in a psych ward where I wasn't given the right medication and I wasn't given the right food. And this was a year ago. And I'm still affected by that, that even the people that you think you trust could be the people that rat on you and that report on you and are not checking in on you. And I remember looking back at my posts and I'm like, I did not write anything about self-harm. I did not write anything about something that was really concerning. I just wrote about, on a day that people are fasting, about typical mental health stuff, and that should be valid. But when you open yourself up there and out there, you're also inviting the critics to come with it. And I had a therapist who once said to me, there is the saying, think before you speak, but also be prepared for who is going to critique. And that might be meaning to go to your therapist or to have your wellness team or whatever the kids do these days. But it's just things to think about, food for thought.
I mean, Derrick, you had a very direct.
Yeah.
I don't even know how to frame it.
So I am a beast at this. I'm old, so I don't know social media like that, but I hired Chelsea Manning. So when you need help and you need security, don't play with the small people. Get somebody that knows how to do it. And Chelsea Manning came on a little hoverboard. I couldn't believe it with my own eyes. And helped
Made an
us,
entrance.
helped us rethink what security could look like. Because I am not only national, I'm global. A lot of this stuff in a lot of ways that are moving, I need help. So I hired, again, Black trans women. I hired our ambassadors because I believe in hiring what we have. So if we got talent in the group and the talent is social media and security and all the things that an old bitch like me don't know, I hired these young people that are trans, I think Black trans creatives, and they literally do all the stuff I don't even have to ask for because they know how to do it. I'm willing to learn, but again, 59, I'm not really rushing. But I think when we entrust people we can trust to do that work for us, to make us or bring us up to date, also follow the techniques that they know, because again, I'm not doing it. But I need the security around my work, and there are crazy people all over this world, and some of that stuff I should not see. They figured out how that stuff can be directed to an exact folder that goes somewhere. If it goes too far, it goes to the feds. So I never have to get involved. That my staff can pinpoint these things where I'm not safe. Everything down to the picture of my door. So if somebody comes to my house or a reporter and they take a picture of my door, they won't get the number. It comes out fuzzy. That's some shit the kids did with the algorithm. And I've had reporters say, we tried to get the address of your building. That might be the hospital.
There they are now.
No, my mom's at the hospital.
Oh, sorry.
There's such emphasis on what security looks like because we give ourselves to the world. We never know which one of those people are going to follow us back. And in many cases, through trailing or through trolling our projects, what we're doing, often there's a sick person that falls into that and decides they want to shadow ban you or follow you. Or I was in Berlin, and a client actually from New York knew that I was going to Berlin for a film festival and sat right next to me and whispered, "Bet you didn't think you would see me here." And I leaned back. I noticed. I waited until I really had to go to the bathroom, and I told my staff, "Leave him alone. Let's leave." But clearly, he was able to follow me through so I had to even learn stuff like that. Don't put it out in the universe where I'm going until I'm actually fucking there. Because you really can't trust, you know, how much that we bring in, but through social media, we put so much out, we don't know who it's going to offend, who it's going to make happy, who's going to be overzealous and wants to create a whole scenario around my girlfriend got attacked a couple of days ago because she broke down about Palestine. And there's so many people mad at her because she's not Jewish, she's not from Palestine. And she broke down. And I had to tell the guys, just cut her shit off. You don't need to look at this for a couple of days. Let us look at it. But clearly she was trolled after that to the point where she took a sick leave from her job because she feels like people are watching her. So we have to be intentional about the security around our work, especially in this time when we're demonized even for doing stuff right. We need to be intentional because before social media, what was we doing? We were fighting. You could call somebody and text, I will fax you a fight. Meet me outside. Social media, you can't do that. You're being attacked without consciousness. You're being attacked by people that don't even know you, but they think they know you because you've created something in an algorithm that says you are that bitch. No, we have to secure ourselves in this work.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've always said that sort of, I know we fought a lot in ACT UP, is sort of notorious for internal fighting, but we would go out and drink after. But I think the key is that I've always thought if we were around actually during digital with social media, we never would have lasted a year. I think that we would have been the anonymous trolling and stuff. I mean, it was hard when it was in the room, but at least it was in the room, and I know who's calling me this. But when it's anonymous, it's very hard. But something else you said I want to sort of grab onto, unless, Derrick, you want to address the surveillance things. I know that's a thing for you.
Yeah, I can talk about that all day. It just depends on specifically what we're trying to address when it comes to surveillance. I think everybody in this room knows that we live in a police state, a surveillance state that disproportionately harms and targets people of color, specifically Black trans women, and there's different tools that are weaponized against us, not even in terms of the digital realm. It could be in terms of just showing up at a protest. Everything from facial recognition technology to scramblers that tap into your phone. There's a whole bunch of different tools that not just like random people are using, but the federal government as well as the NYPD against people that are organizing in public. And a lot of people face the consequences of that heavily. And one of them specifically is Black trans women, specifically when it comes to facial recognition technology. Currently, Amnesty International is doing a campaign that I'm featured on called Ban the Scan, one of their largest and most profitable campaigns that they've had in the last 5 years. But it really focuses on how surveillance technology and specifically facial recognition technology is used against different organizers, not just, in New York City, but globally. A lot of the same surveillance tools that are used against New Yorkers, specifically Black New Yorkers, are also used against the Palestinian people, and other surveillance states in China. And it's really a hard thing to try to navigate. But there's different coalitions that are building and different initiatives that are starting currently, of different activist groups trying to come up with live legal updates as well as knowledge and curriculum around the surveillance technology that's being used. There's different documents that have been leaked. One of my friends here, Kim, we were going over a document, I think last spring, that had leaked around all the surveillance tools and technology that the NYPD was using against protesters at different points in time. So it's a messy topic and it's very difficult, but the surveillance is out there and we just have to stay aware and keep abreast and keep updated on the different technology that's permeating these spaces.
I want to. Might I add?
Absolutely.
Surveillance cameras cannot pick up big glasses. So if you have big glasses, they do not recognize you.
Oh, the Jackie O.
I did a training with the feds when they introduced this and implemented this. They wanted to train sex worker orgs, and I did this in Brooklyn, and I learned a lot. So things like glasses, hats, anything that distorts your image protects you from this. A lot of people don't know that, but that's the reality.
Just like a movie star, right?
Yeah.
It's like the hat, the cap,
Any
the glasses.
kind of thing that configurates your look, they're not able to pick up. So a face mask, they're not able to get the eyes. Those kind of things can protect you against this in a normal, everyday walking down a block. But clearly, if you are an advocate, some of my major New York City girlfriends have been in a lot of trouble because the feds know everything. They know where she lives, her bank account, all of it. It's not okay, but again, security.
I actually, I know we do want to get to questions. Also, I would actually like to. We're in a particularly fraught moment, both because of what's going on in the world with Palestine, with and Ukraine, all sorts of things, but also in this country, we're at this point. Our communities are suffering a huge backlash, both legislatively, politically, socially. I mean, we are between, anti-trans legislation and Dobbs and the attack on how we control our own bodies and, any number of other issues. So the time for activism is now. And I guess the question is I'm not even going to ask this because I'm going to say that I don't think there's a one shoe fits all approach to activism, right? It's that there's got to be bodies in the street, there got to be people, in the halls of Congress, there got to be people in all these different areas. How do we navigate a movement that requires, and maybe it doesn't, and if it doesn't, tell me, requires both people in the street pushing the envelope and people, in the halls of at the State House, in Congress, doing legislative work and doing court work, because we also know the courts aren't protecting us at this point, if they ever have. How do we create a movement that allows all of these different parts without jumping down each other's throats?
Just to circle back to some of the things that you said and I said previously, I don't believe that a thread in terms of coalition building and movement building can be solely based on our identities. Yep. I think that's stale. I think that's old. And I think we've tried to do that before. And I think and believe that it has to be on shared values and agreed upon rules and initiatives and things that we want to accomplish. And I think having those conversations and building that infrastructure out is going to be the most important. And I think that that's a lot of the groundwork that's happening now. And it's really going to be a lot about the timing and communication of that.
Yeah. You go.
Let me see, where do I begin? I agree with that to a point. I think that I don't want to throw out the baby with the bathwater, as it were. I think our identities are important. And I don't want us to lose our sense of self, our sense of particular community when we engage with other people and other communities. I think being clear that that we learned over the years. I think we have learned a lot about the nature of oppression, the systems that divide us, that keep us down, they keep us at war with each other because we have struggled around our identities. So the women's movement pushed an understanding of gender dynamics, right? The queer movement pushed a lot of understandings around gender and sexuality. The civil rights movement, the Black liberation movement, and other people of color movements pushed everybody to understand the racial dynamics and the reality of racism and white supremacy, right? And the need to fight that as you're fighting for everything else. So to me, it's not an either or, right? We hold our identities and we build those bridges. And we find the common values, the common goals. So it's a balancing act. The other thing I want to say is that there's, unfortunately, nobody has at this point a roadmap for how we deal with this. We are all struggling to figure it out. One piece of it is that I think we have to be honest with ourselves and with each other about how big the problem is. We are up against an economic system, capitalism, that is dominant. I have friends who say capitalism is in crisis. I don't see it. I see capitalism on steroids is what I see at this point. And we are up against again, white supremacist set of assumptions and attitudes and institutions and functioning, right? We are up against a military force, the likes of which human history has never seen, and a surveillance force.
I agree. I agree with you.
So let me just say one thing, and then I'm sorry. And because we understand all those forces, we need all the tactics we can find. And it's not about saying being in the streets is more important than lobbying work or the educational work or the media work or the challenging the narrative work. It's all has to be happening. That's all. So.
That was a lot, and I appreciate you sharing that. That was amazing. One of the things that I think is unique specifically about my perspective, and this is where I'm coming from, and you can take this for what you will, is that I'm a black man, and you know what I'm saying? And a lot of what you said, I agree with wholeheartedly. But what to me is most important in situations like this is talking about people's current conditions and situations. And the reason I say and I emphasize that my identity shouldn't get me into certain spaces and my identity isn't what is the utmost importance. I'm really not even talking about my blackness because that's not something that I can hide. I have the ability to navigate and to get into certain spaces because they may not know that I'm queer or gay. But what they will always know about me is that I'm a black man. And what I've noticed and specifically seen is that class and race plays such a vital role in a lot of queer spaces that and I'm probably sure a lot of other people feel ostracized from in this space. And I, a lot of the times, don't have a commonality, nor do I want a coalition build or be in the same space with a lot of white, cis, queer folks. And it's because they have no class analysis, no racial understanding. And to me, that it does take away a lot of the times my want and need to want to be in community with a lot of these people because they don't understand what it's like to be poor. They don't get what it's like to be black. They don't understand what it's like not to have health care. So for me personally, the most important thing is having a racial and class analysis. And there is violence. There is violence against the queer community. But for me specifically, what I'm saying is personally, my identity, my queer identity hasn't been what's been weaponized against me, and it's specifically what hasn't been weaponized against me in spaces that where people share my same sexuality. It's me being black. It's me not being in a certain tax bracket, and I think we have to keep that in mind when we talk about aligning ourselves with the LGBTQIA community as a whole. We have to acknowledge the racism and the classism that exist within those spaces as well that can push people out.
Yeah, absolutely.
Ooh, Okay. So we're living in the world of Becky and Karen, and we have to be real here. The reality is, as a black trans woman, everything you said was so cute. Optimistic, so cute. Optimistic. We're up to our necks in the shit. Because we're looking at new policing, new jails, jails without support, reentry programs that lead black people right back to jail. We're looking at a housing program that fails. We're looking at a medical system that fails, a mental health system that fails, and so many other systems that fail. But guess who they fail? Black LGBT community members. We're looking at politics taking away Black history. We're looking at states taking away trans rights, gay rights, LGBT, GT, all the shit, taking away our rights. We're looking at governments turning around women's choices and bodies. So we have to be clear to say that it's okay to say this world is turning to shit. Bottom line. But we have to be proactive in creating the change necessary to make it happen. And fortunately and unfortunately, it depends on the professors and institutions. These institutions right here is where this is built. The next generation of lawyers and social workers and doctors are going to come out of institutions. And I hope they have a trans teacher. I hope they have a gay teacher, a lesbian teacher, a gender nonconforming teacher, because then we're able to teach a different society, somebody that may be unsuspecting, that have never met a LGBT community member. You might be teaching tolerance without ever knowing that you're teaching a lesson. So we need to be doing this all the way down the line in politics and everywhere across the world. And damn it, please, the Catholic Church, somebody call the Pope.
all of that to say is, like, I believe that the common thread that needs to be a part of the movement is seeing people's humanity. And not all gay people, not all lesbian people see my or her humanity. So the common thread has to be seeing everybody's humanity, having a class analysis, having a racial understanding, knowing your history, and respecting and holding space for people that may be different from you. I think that's going to be the common thread.
Privilege is based on, perception. It's how people perceive who you are and what you are. Nobody would ever know or think, because I'm trans, you would not think. I grew up in Park Slope, in a landmark, in Grand Army Plaza, owned by black people. Normally, when people ask me a question, the first question they ask is, well, what project do you come from? Well, bitch, do I look like I come from a project? Because I come from Grand Army Plaza, the plaza. And then they go, oh, well, how did this happen to you? What happened?
Yeah, wow.
Sweetie, I was born. I don't even know how to answer that. I was born. It's just the perception that we are lower class because we are lower than, because you don't perceive us as being equal. And that's a problem. That's going to be a generational problem that'll go on for decades. Equality, it's not really happening, sweetie. It's nothing people can say. It's never going to be equal. There's always going to be a class that feels like they're better than the next class. We have to correct that wrong. We have to do that work. We have to create programs and things that shape and help curb the oppressions that have been oppressing us for years. Then we have to get our allies. Most of them don't have mic pigmentation. Y'all got that? So our allies to do the work of dealing with Karen and Becky. So I don't have to do it. So they don't have to do it. And the reality of change starts from y'all, not from us. Because that's where the change needs to happen. Historically, it needs to be taught by the people that are oppressing us. There it is.
I know I'm just conscious of time, and I want to ask questions, have questions in case. I know you want to talk, you haven't talked in a while, so.
I'll try to keep it brief. It was actually for something similar to ACT UP in Park Slope. There's this artist collaborative space, And I remember I was asking a question about, real systemic change and what that looks like. And there was a Black queer mentor of mine, an artist, who told me that it's important to understand that everyone is processing from a different place, right? Some of us are activists, some of us are lawyers, some of us are artists. And also the mentality and the shift of people, right, is not going to all come from the streets, right? We could be on the streets, we could chant, we could scream, but we could also push a lot of people away in that same process. And if we're not coming in with this mindset of how are we changing, what I hear is the narrative, right? The long arc of narrative justice to advance our people, then being in the street with 50,000 people without an end goal to improve the narrative is insufficient. So we need to think about constantly how are we devising together theater, art, writing, panels, whatever, to advance the narrative for all of us, because we're not free until all of us are free.
Thank you. I want to also just open this up for a little while to any questions. There's a question. Yes? You press the button and it goes, yeah.
Oh, okay. Is this good?
Yeah.
Okay. I just wanted to ask a question about, so you guys talked about, which I really appreciated, you guys talked about, coalition building and being invited into spaces where you're kind of used as the workhorse as opposed to the brain. And I think I see that happen so much. As a Black woman organizer myself, was I'm not queer.
That's okay. We'll let it.
That's
let it
okay. But as a Black woman who's also an organizer and an activist, I see it happen so much. And I'm hoping that one of you guys can touch on this. But we are invited into these spaces, and sometimes I feel like there isn't like the clear communication or the understanding sometimes that instead of organizations who hold a great deal of privilege and have a great deal of funding, instead of inviting us in to sort of be the face so you can say, hey, here's this Black queer organizer that we have, and using us as a prop, sometimes what we really need is your money. We need your money. Give us money. And, that is what we really need to be able to move our communities forward. And I feel like sometimes, these people, they invite us in and they take up a lot of space. And at the end of the day, we end these coalition building exercises feeling like we were used and nothing more. And a lot of the times, Black organizers, we organize from the space, we're organizing from a position of lack. Like we go out and we fill the streets and we call 10, 20, 30,000 people into the streets and we do all these great things for our communities. And at the end of the day, we go home and we're going through eviction and we can't feed our community and we want to do all these things within our communities and we can't do it because there's no funding. And I'm hoping that you guys someone can touch very briefly on how can organizations who are probably primarily white, who hold a great deal of power and funding and resources really actually help organizers like you guys, who have the power, the influence, the knowledge of community, but don't have the funding and the backing and the resources.
Anyone got the magic?
So again, these institutions, so I've been talking in universities for about 15 years. My first funder, Children of Google. The kids were in the class, never knew anything about sexuality. Both children came out same time, same dad. The dad got in contact with me through the website in tears. One, that his kids were coming out, but two, his kids were challenged to the point where the daughter wants to be a lawyer and the son wants to be an extraditer for the reasons of getting people or having people have a community member to do that work. And I never thought about that. the funder didn't see me as, because he never even, I don't think the kids told him I was black, but he was like so thrilled that his kids, one, came out, but two, were invested in college. They had fucked up the first year of college completely. And this had turned on a light bulb. These institutions where we're talking to young people are grassroots at how you get to the money. Because when we tell our story to these kids, they go home and tell their grandmothers and their grandmothers' grandmothers, and that ancestral money comes down the pike.
And that's why they want to
Generational wealth.
and that's why they want to take our histories out of the schools. Right? It's
That's why they want to remove black.
Because, exactly, if you cut it off at the knees, people are without root.
Then you have no answers.
Exactly.
So if you take away the problem, you have no proof of the history.
Right. Yes. Leslie, do you want to say something?
Just one thought. Response. I think that we should not be shy, even though it seems hard. It is hard to confront these organizations and institutions. We should try, and we should not be shy about being clear about we need X number of dollars in order to do X, Y, or Z, right? And we need space to meet, space to gather. We need, whatever the needs are. The other thing, though, we should do with organizations that have fairly large budgets is to say to them, when we need your fundraising people, to introduce us to your funders so that we can get funding directly as we need it. Right. It's on every layer that we need to be challenging for resources. The other thing we do, of course, need to remember is that all of us, even the larger queer organizations, I have a lot of problems with too. I don't go near them. I gave up a long time ago with all of them, actually. But nonetheless, their money and their resources are relatively small compared to what the right wing has and the government has.
They have billions and billions and millions of dollars in the center and GMHC. Let's not stonewall.
But they don't have Coke. They don't have the Koch brothers. They don't have the Elon Musk money. They don't have the billionaires' money.
They got money,
But they have executive directors getting paid $400K.
I know, and
That's crazy.
is obscene.
That's crazy.
It's crazy. It's obscene. It's wrong. Right? I totally
Now, mind you,
and I just said we should challenge them. We should say, don't put all that money into that. Don't pay these ridiculous
when you're
salaries.
paying an
Give our
executive
community
director that don't look like me, that does not have my experience, that is not a person of color, quote unquote, then you're not really paying for the services. Right. You're paying for the look.
Right.
That money could be split. You could cut that to $250,000 and still have 200 and something thousand to give away. So we're pouring into these big LGBT agencies without missing the middle ground.
Right.
9 to 5, those agencies are open. What about the people going through shit from the hours on?
Right.
That are going to jail, that are being beat, that have no food?
And that's why, again, I am less concerned about the name of an organization, and more concerned about your morals, your personal politics, your values. You can be an amazing organization that says you're protecting gay people, but are you protecting poor, black, trans people that are out on the streets? What work are you doing towards the most marginalized in that community? And I can't say that most, if not all, organizations that say that they're helping LGBTQIA people are concerned specifically with addressing that root cause and that class issue, which I think is really, really important.
I started my agency selling sex. So I was taking care of my clients, and I was a sex worker 24/7 because I found I could help people more than any agency in New York. and I was a sex worker. And after I got arrested, I decided I wasn't doing that anymore. But I already had a niche market enough to invest in me, to invest in my community. So all things are possible. Within this work, if a hoe could turn what I'm doing into $1 million company that helps people.
You're going to ask a question.
No, I want to answer Kim's question.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I have another commitment that the timing of this panel changed, so it was supposed to end a little early. So I'm going to have to leave, but I don't want anybody in the room, including the panelists, to think I'm leaving over a disagreement or
No,
anything.
baby.
We're all in the same. But I have this obligation I have to get to, so that's why I'm sorry.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you, Leslie.
Thank you for coming.
I appreciate your being here. I mean, I know we're sort of at time anyway, but I just wanted to see if there were any. I know you wanted to answer a question, and if whether anyone else wanted to ask a question. Is there one? Just okay. That'd be one. So you answer, you ask, and then we'll go.
No, I was going to agree with what Leslie said about being direct about the wants and needs of your community and your organization. And specifically, like, I think there's a thin line between begging and exploiting white voyeurism, which I think is an actual thing. Like, white organizations and white people specifically love staring at black and brown people in distress, including organizations. Like, we see it online with, it's not funny. It's like the death of the black body and like all of these things that we see online and organizations and people that they see struggling. And there's this white savior mentality. And I personally exploit that. I exploit
We
it.
see it with some of the fun.
I exploit it. Oh, you feel guilty? Okay.
Guilt
Then
is a
help
very-
me. Help me.
Go. Yep.
Yeah.
Some of the New Pride Agenda and Lorena Borjas Fund, they want every trans or LGBT agency to do a dog and pony show. And nobody gets that fucking money. They extended or spilled it over to the next year. But every organization has to do a tap dance. Just give the fucking money out. Just give it to people.
Do you want to ask a question? Or comment?
This is maybe too large of a question.
For the last 3 seconds, yes.
So looking back over the last 50 years of organizing, but particularly, like I know most of the organizing, but I think this is true queer organizing and anti-war organizing. In the 90s, up until the 90s and early 2000s, there were national organizations organizing mass movements, marches on Washington.
Yeah, it was a question.
And I don't, from where I sit, from my perspective, I don't know that we have those movements anymore. We're much more locally based, making impacts locally. Is this, how do you feel about this? Is this a problem? Should we be building towards something more national, global? Or, what is the, I don't know, I have mixed feelings about it, so
I'm helping people internationally. So each and every region I'm in or Glitz is in, I just try to do the work. I don't have time to schlep and worry about that agency and this agency. I worry more about people getting what they need. So I can't be caught up in that world. Also, I don't have government funding. I'm privately funding. Oh, wow. So people believe in the work I'm doing because I'm able to create master's degrees, bachelor's degrees, doctorates. This is investing in a community like you won't see. And I just think when you're thinking of that young woman or young man that comes out of jail, how can I help you not go back to jail? So the same way I'm pouring into community at this level, community's pouring back. As far as organizing with others, I don't care if I never organize with anybody. I'm fine. I like what I do. My staff love what we do, and we're happy helping people. If I was unhappy, I wouldn't do this work. I signed on because I love what I do.
I would love for there to be more national campaigns and initiatives around all the marginalized groups and trans and queer rights. But I believe that what's happening right now is a lot of foundation building and, like I said, a level of consciousness raising. And I think that's happening and being propelled because of all of the hate and harmful laws that are happening. But I don't think that's going to turn into direct national massive change, unfortunately, because people aren't there consciously. Also, I think it's better on a regional and local level because we're dealing with houselessness and police violence and a lot of other things on the local level to address people's immediate needs because those aren't being met at the local level. I think that's most important. I think nobody can tell you what you need more than somebody that's within your community or a neighbor or, you know what I mean? And what I've seen a lot from national movements is people from different states or DC telling people what they need on a local level. And so that's just my hesitation about it. But I think once we get there and we have the right infrastructure and the level of consciousness there, that there will be a massive national movement. That's what I believe.
I've been told we're sort of at
Okay.
time. If you,
I'll say it just very quickly.
okay, you go.
I hate this idea that we use the word community, and we also use community as a singular past tense. We know there isn't a monolith and a community of just one type of queer people, one type of black people. In New York City, there are thousands of black communities and thousands of Jewish communities and queer communities. So when I hear people come up to me and say, oh, why don't you turn to this community for help? And I'm like, oh, the people on 72nd Street that hate my guts and close the doors on me, but expect me to be in Passover in the Hamptons? No. So there's that. And also, I used to grow up with this mentality of having to repair the world in such a large level when you realize that repair starts with self. And there's so much that we could do on an individual level. There are kids that need support, that need mentors, that need people to talk to, that don't have that community. And we're all here and we all have access to different resources, right? It could be literally offering someone a dinner meal that I've done all throughout pandemic. I've hosted over 100 meals for people who didn't have spaces to go to in the ceremony of Shabbat to bringing people together. And then eventually politicians came along and artists came along and other folks come along. And that was just an individual act that I was able to do and open it without question. You need a meal? Sure. So don't look at me or any one of us, but I'm saying, not that, I'm just saying as one model, right? There's many models to go, but I feel that we individually all have resources that we could do things that could lead up to something bigger.
Okay, we could go on, but I want to, exactly, but it's time. I want to thank the panel. You were all just amazing. And I want to thank again Connor and Nat for making this happen. And thank you up there in Zoom land.
This little thing.
And thanks.
I do, but I really handpick.
Absolutely.
Who I kiss and
We'll return in another 10, 12 minutes or so for the next panel.
You were right about the 9 to 5.
oh my God.
Professional for a little bit.
Like I literally seen like a
Twerking
bunch
6
of
to
girls.
9.
Yeah, I seen a bunch of girls just recently in Philadelphia. And one of the girls was like, I'm scared to come and talk to you. And I said, bitch, for what?
Can I put my hand?
Oh,
I need you to do it for me too.
Ooh, I want to get these nails down.
I think I glow in the dark. It's my fairy dust.
Ooh. I'm going to have to charge you after 5 minutes. Thank you.
Okay. Oh,
Thank you.
I wanna
Don't go
learn more
nowhere.
about- Are you still doing the Shabbat thing, or is it?
Yeah.
Oh, I would love to learn about that too.
Yes, of course.
Absolutely.
I have so much I have to learn from you. I'm like, what am I doing?
No, that sounds great. Like,
Here?
thank you so much.
A few degrees, a few, okay, a few experiences.
Oh, come on. Sit back down. Come on, get in here. Get in here.
Come.
Before they throw us out on our keistas. Yes.
It's all right.
Thank you. Okay.
Thank you all so
Thank you for the invite. My whole
Thank you for
world
your
is
work.
falling apart right now, brother.
You too.
Thanks.
Rest of resistance.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard of you. I didn't know y'all were privately.
Oh, yeah.
Privately
Oh, I
funded.
don't fuck with people. I've been strategic about that.
I thought y'all were a 501c.
I am a 501c.
Oh, you just get all your funding private.